Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machin La'ira online smicha. Um, I want to discuss today a halacha which is not maybe that relevant to so many people, but the point behind it is perhaps something that we could learn. You know that many halachas that we do is based on the fact that v'neflinu, that the Eibishter wants the nations to be separate. That the Jewish, I don't mean the nations in nationality, it means nations in religion. The Eibishter wants the Jewish religion to be aloof, to be separate from all other religions, and in many ways we're not allowed to mingle. And there's a lot of halachas that are buffer zones, that are restrictions to prevent mingling, like bishul lakum, pasakum, all those things are stay to your people. And obviously, intermarriage is an issue. There's a lot of tevilas kalim, that when you buy a keli that belonged to a guy and you want to bring it into your rishus, you have to toivel it. So that's because there's a separation of religion, is a separation of identity. And it's different kedusha, and it's actually a kedusha of the Yidden is a specialty. So one of the questions that I want to discuss today is, after 120, when people pass away, so there's a mitzvah of Cavora, of burial, to bury the deceased. You hear a lot that people have chosen cremation. It's a problem, halacha. We're not getting into now. I once discussed that already. But burial. So there's a mitzvah of Cavora, and the question is, does the separation of Jew and lahavdil non-Jew have to be even during Cavora? Meaning to say, do Jews have to be buried in a separate cemetery, in a separate area than goyim, or you could have a goy, a non-Jew, buried amongst Jewish people? And you obviously could see how complicated this halacha could be, this situation could be. Sometimes it's a question of a righteous guy, very kind guy, helps out a lot. Sometimes it's a situation of an intermarried family, which that could be really controversial. Sometimes it could be a conversion that was mid-conversion and the person passes away. It could even be a step further. Not mid-conversion, a complete conversion, but not a orthodox or a real conversion. So how would you deal with this problem if it is a problem? So it all starts in the Gemara in Gittin, Daf Samach Aleph, Amud Aleph. The Gemara says that you do bury the Gentiles, the dead of the Gentiles, together with the dead Jews. The mitzvah of Cavora will apply for the goyim just like it applies lahavdil by the Yidden. Why? So the Gemara says, because of darkei shalom. Now, what does darkei shalom mean? Literally, when we hear the words darkei shalom, means to cause peace, not to make such a obvious split. So if you're burying, when you're burying the Jew, you're also allowed to bury the Gentile. And Rashi Taka writes, if you come into an area and you see Rahman al-Atzlan, that there are many people died, some Jews and lahavdil, and lahavdil, some non-Jews, you can't just pick the Jews and bury them. Then there are many dead people, you bury all of them, the Jews and the non-Jews. However, the Ran, if they were separate, in other words, just only a non-Jew that passes away, a Gentile passes away, you have no obligation, you have no mitzvah necessarily to bury them. The Ran, however, says that you bury a non-Jew even if you find the Gentile body by himself. So we have a machlekes between Rashi and the Ran. Rashi says that darkei shalom, when you find them together, you bury both. But if you find them separately, if you find a Gentile body, you don't necessarily have a mitzvah to bury. The Ran says even then the mitzvah applies. The Rambam in Hilchos Malachim Perek Yud Halacha Yud Beis, writes that we have a mitzvah to bury even the non-Jews, and he quotes the pasuk. What we say in Ashrei, say in Tehillim, we say, "Toiv Hashem lakol, v'rachamav al kol maso." Hashem is good to all, v'rachamav, and His mercy is al kol maso. His mercy extends to all creations. So all creation means that Jew or non-Jew. And the Rambam, based on this, the Gemara says, Darkei Sholem. The Gemara says the reason why we bury non-Jews also is because of acting in a way of peace. So the Rambam actually interprets the way of peace here different than what we usually interpret it. Usually we interpret it, do something that it should not cause an animosity. If you don't help out the guy now, there's going to be hatred, there's going to be an animosity. That's usually what Darkei Sholem means. Over here, it seems to be that Rambam, instead of saying the Darkei Sholem, Rashi is quoting the pasuk of the Rambam is quoting the pasuk of Toiv Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol maso. That's a proof that he interprets it that the act of burial is an act of the pathway of peace, and that's why it should be done. So it's not to make animosity. You have to show rachmanis. You have to, one of the ways of Toiv Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol maso is by Cavora. And therefore, since it says al kol maso, you should bury even a Gentile. Now, the Rambam, is considering it as an act of Gemilas Chesadim. Okay, so now we have the different opinions. However, the fact is that if you look in the Jewish cemeteries, you look in the cemeteries today, you'll see that you usually don't find that they bury non-Jews amongst the Jews. And perhaps that's Rashi's Shitta. That's because Rashi says only if it happened to be there were different bodies together, you bury the non-Jew too together. And the Ran says that the Gemara in Sanhedrin actually leans towards this behavior of not burying them together. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, in Daf Mem Vav, the Gemara says that God forbid if people were executed due to a punishment, or any wicked man, when it comes to after 120 and you're burying him, the Gemara says you don't bury a wicked man near a righteous man. You don't bury a lower crime punishment next to a higher crime punishment. Even if two people got the death sentence, but one got a lower level death sentence, one got a higher level death sentence, we separate the wicked from the not so wicked from the wicked. So we see the concept of separation is there. Now, not chas v'shalom necessarily saying that every goy is wicked. There is a beautiful tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe Chelik Yeridea, Chelik Gimel, where the Rav Moshe says that even if there's a goy, a Gentile, that did Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, so he did everything right. Clearly, the custom became that he doesn't get buried among Jews. So obviously, the separation, why we don't bury the guy amongst the Jews, has nothing to do with the fact that are wicked. It's because, as mentioned, as I started in the beginning of this year, there's a concept of vinaflinu, the kedusha, the aloof, the holiness, or the spirituality of a Jew is of a different sort. So we just bury them apart. How far back could you date this custom of having the Jews and lahavdil the goyim buried separately? This could go back based on the dialogue between Rus and Naomi. We know the story. Rus, who was the great grandmother of David HaMelech, Rus had Naomi, who was a Moabit. Rus, who was on the Moavit, who wanted to go back with her mother-in-law Naomi, and Naomi was pushing her away by saying to be a Jew has a lot of restrictions, a lot of limitations. And one of the things how Rus was begging for it, Rus says, I'm in it for the go. I'm in it for the full 9 yards. And whatever restrictions a Yid has, I'm ready to take it. So one of the things she says, Basher Tamusi Tamusi, wherever you die, I will die. What does that mean? So the Targum explains that since the Jews back then were buried in different places than the non-Jews. So Rus was saying, I'm going to do everything to be buried in the same cemetery as you, and I'm willing to go through the whole proper conversion to be buried with you. So we see that even back then, there was the separation of burial between Jew and non-Jew. So the Bach Taka writes that this separation is a regular situation where people pass away normally. But if, as mentioned before, the Gemara in Gittin says that sometimes you do bury goy mipnei darkei shalom. When is that? That's if the Gentiles and the Jews lahavdil were found together, their bodies were found together, then the Bach Paskins, they may be buried together, as the Gemara says. So that's a summary of that halacha. Where does that play a big discussion today's days? And this could be found in Shilas Teshuvas Minchas Elazar, Shilas Teshuvas Igris Moshe, who discuss these upcoming issues. How about an intermarriage case where their spouse is not Jewish? Or how about a case of a person who's in the middle of a conversion but passed away before he completes the process? Or what about somebody who considers himself Jewish because he or she thinks that they went through the conversion, but we know that the conversion was not converted properly. So obviously, you see that we're dealing with the fact is that we don't bury non-Jews with Jews, but are there any exceptions to the law? So the Moshe Feinstein, when we have these difficult situations, Moshe Feinstein somehow takes a little more lenient approach, and he says, fine, you could bury them in a Jewish cemetery, but he requires a separation of 8 amos. Don't bury them mamish next to the Jew. Separate them 8 amos. 8 amos is usually every amma is 1.5 feet, so that would be like 12 feet. Or if not possible, if you can't separate them 8 amos, at least 4 amos away. He also says another way, if you can't even separate, if you have no space to move them apart, another way is to erect a fence of a small fence of 10 tefachim around it, so it's a little separated. That is Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's approach in a situation like that. Others have said that allowing a non-halacha convert to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, you could do that in a separate row. If it is a separate row where non-Jews generally would be permitted, so over there in the separate row, somebody who is in the middle of the conversion or went through a non-proper conversion, you put them there. Now you know that this is a shaila that in Israel was a very big difficulties because many people came from Russia and they were immigrants from Russia, and the Jewish status of those people were unclear. So, or in Israel, there's another situation. The Israeli army doesn't have all the soldiers Jewish. There are some non-Jewish soldiers, and if they get killed in the war, you want to honor them for what they did. Could they be buried in a Jewish cemetery? So Reb Shlomo Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF and later became the chief rabbi of Israel, he allowed, they say at least theoretically, burying a non-Jewish soldier who was in the Tzahal in the Jewish cemetery. And his reason for that is, he says that the Goy who fights for the land of Eretz Yisrael is considered even greater than Chasidei Umas Olam. When Chasidei Umas Olam, we say have a portion Olam Haba. So if a Goy went on Mesiras Nefesh to fight for Eretz Yisrael, he has some quality. Some finish off this topic by quoting a Gemara in Baba Basra Daf Yud. The Gemara says that there are certain people that due to their meisim tovim, due to their kind acts, no creature can stand in their heavenly section of and that is of Papas and two great goyim who were killed defending the Jewish people. So because we see that their Ulam Haba, their reward was so great, so therefore some are lenient, allow them to be buried in Jewish cemeteries. In practice, what happens is special sections have been set aside in Israel and civilian and military cemeteries for the non-Jews because of this discussion that we had. So this is a summary of, to summarize what we learned is like this. Just to bury a regular non-Jew in a Jewish cemetery who passes away seems to be, it's not common. Darkei Shalom doesn't necessarily apply there. If the Jews and the non-Jews were found dead together, there is place to bend. If it's a Jew, a non-Jew that did something great, chesed umas olam, they did tremendous benefit for Jews, then there are ways how you could find places in the Jewish cemetery to allow them to be buried there.